evening from Swansea, wrestling fans. I'm your host, Ben Allison, and you are watching Wrestling Republic's daily broadcast. Your one-stop shop for professional wrestling, insight, news, and reviews on a daily basis. And today we have an absolutely stacked show for you guys. We're going to be discussing whether or not the WWE ID Championships could lead to WWE becoming a monopoly or having a monopoly over the wrestling business, as well as discussing if HBK, Shawn Michaels, should have one more match after his recent comments. We're going to discuss the highly controversial Ricky Saints name change, and I have flipped my opinion on that in just the last few minutes. And we're also going to be discussing if this version of NXT is the best version yet. Got a lot to get into, and we have a stacked panel to do it with. Clark, let's kick things off with you. How are you on this fine Wednesday afternoon?
I'm fired up to be here. We have so much to talk about. This is electric. All kinds of good stuff last night on NXT. Got some fun topics. Let's get right into it, dude.
Absolutely. And also joining us today, we have opinion writer and reviewer here at Wrestling Republic, Archie Carter. How are you, Archie?
I'm doing good, mate. We've got, as you said, a very stacked show. It's a mouth-watering set of topics we've got set up today. So, yeah, as Clark said, let's get right into it.
Absolutely, just like absolute Ricky Starks, but that's later on. And D6 Warlords comment, it's because Ricky Starks is from New Orleans. We're going to be getting into that later on, to make sure you stay tuned. Number one Superfly says Moose versus Obafemi is a match that he wants to see, possibly even a match of the year contender. Of course, that is official now for not next week's NXT, but sorry, it's not official yet, but it's going to be official after the two faced off for an NXT or pay-per-view in the very near future. And Fernando loved NXT last night. Right, first things first, let's talk the ID, WWE ID, because in case you guys don't know what's going on with this situation, basically, WWE are partnering with certain independent promotions and certain independent training schools to basically have, I don't want to say ownership because that's not the right word, but to give contracts to independent talent. Yeah, it's a bit bizarre because they're not actually, I mean, nobody in the company is an employee, but these are even further from an employee because they're not even properly being paid. It's really, really confusing, and we still don't know all the contractual details. But the new development as of yesterday is that Triple H has announced WWE ID Championships, and these ID Championships are going to be defended across the independent wrestling scene. Now, obviously, WWE is going to choose who has them. It's presumably only going to be ID talents who even fight for it. But here is the thing, right? And here is the big worry that a lot of people have. If, these WWE ID championships do have a lot of traction behind them and do a lot of great business for the independent scene, will then pretty much every independent promotion try and partner with WWE just so they have a chance of having those ID belts on a show of theirs at some point? And if that's the case, can they not put AEW wrestlers on their card? Could they not put New Japan wrestlers on their card? A lot of other questions, and this leads to the bigger question: will this make WWE have a monopoly over the rest of the industry? Of course, technically, that would not be allowed, but this is so, it's a grey area. It really is. Clark, I'm really worried, if I'm being honest with you. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm concerned too. On paper, this is a brilliant idea from a business perspective. I can't hate on that in any way. I totally get it, but why would you not book the WWE ID title that can only be contested between two WWE ID contracted wrestlers at the top of your card on the indie scene, given, the support you can receive from a company like WWE? I really hope there's some pushback when it comes to this, in the sense that I hope maybe even WWE is open-minded enough to allow non-contracted WWE ID wrestlers, independent wrestlers, to challenge for the titles, whether they win or lose. I just hope there's something else here. And I hope there's pushback from inside the independent wrestling industry, because this just scares me to death. It's it's just more and more control from a company that's craved it for the length of its existence. We've seen what they've done to the territory system. We've seen what they've done over, a 50 plus year stretch. And yeah, it's terrifying to me. And I just hope that there's some pushback, and this isn't something that lends to the M word you previously suggested.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, here is the other thing I will say, right? And I said this in a YouTube video last week, if you guys haven't seen that, where I talk in detail about this situation and whether or not, it will be bad for the independent scene and just wrestling as a whole. And the short answer is, no, this is fantastic for the independent wrestling scene. But it is only bad for competitor promotions such as AEW or any future competitor that tries to go against WWE. Because if they can't get talent from the independent scene, well, then it's going to be really, really difficult for them to build a roster. Now,
Right.
I know some people are saying, oh, well, they can get the wrestlers released from WWE. WWE can't use everyone. And yeah, you're right. But if that then means you won't be able to work for these independent promotions in the future, if it goes wrong in AEW, it's very, very scary. And in my opinion, I think that is a monopoly,
The
potentially.
perfect example, to your point, is you now cut off the people that have never competed in WWE that have gotten over in AEW. Your MJFs. Right?
I think they'd make exceptions at first, but I mean, 10 years down the line is where
that's
my
what I'm
concern
saying.
would be.
10 years down the line, if you turn that faucet off, and you're only getting who can't compete in WWE, that's a completely different endeavor.
Yeah.
No pun intended there. Woof.
I mean, I also do think, like you said, Clark, from a business perspective, I mean, this is checkmate. This is genius. Absolutely genius, right? And I much prefer it over the NXT territories idea too, because not only do you now have more control, but it actually means that independent promotions can survive and thrive as well. Soul's got an interesting comment here saying, would it make independent booking hard? Would the booker have any control over the match they want for the WWID Championship? We don't know that yet. I personally imagine they would have control. Just obviously the winner would be chosen by WWE. But I imagine on a match-by-match basis, WWE aren't going to hire any additional writers or anything like that. I reckon it's just going to be a thing where it goes to different promotions. There's no real story, big matches, gets eyeballs on the promotions. Everyone has a lot of fun, and then WWE decide, who's going to drop the title to who, etc., etc. And I do think that part is going to be very, very beneficial to independent wrestling. It's just, it would probably mean that WWE will never be beaten as the top dog. And sure, right now you can say, oh, that would never happen, but you don't know for a fact. If this happens, it's next to a fact unless something went really, really, really wrong. Archie, I want to get your thoughts.
Yeah, so first off, I get and understand people's worries and frustrations about this, and I've got sympathy for people that are worried about it and who can be affected by it. But the thing is, WWE idea isn't something I've spoken about on a daily before, and it's something that I've got more of an optimistic mindset towards than others. As we've seen in the group chat. First of all, I want to say about the titles. I think the titles are basically. I don't think the titles are needed. I think it's a bit overboard. I think it's kind of WWE have a tendency to just kind of put a title on anything they kind of do. We've seen it with WWE Speed, and it's the same with WWE ID. I don't think it's needed. But in the same way, I don't think it's going to change the way I see WWE ID as I don't think WWE are going to get that kind of mass control of this industry with these titles. I think the titles aren't going to be defended against talent that aren't WWE ID. I think it's going to be mainly against ID talents, against other ID talents, which I think is a better idea, because, as you said, it gives the bookers a headache in these independent promotions. And yes, it's a big deal having an ID championship match on your match card, but it's just as big of a deal to have a ID champion on your match card without a championship match. So for me, I don't think the titles are needed. I don't think they make much of a difference in terms of WWE having control of the industry either. With WWE ID as a whole, it's something that understandably a lot of fans and a lot of us here at Wrestling Republic have had concerns over since it was announced. So far, and that's based on previous business tactics that we've seen from people in Endeavor. Right now, what I've seen personally is I've not seen many indie wrestlers have a problem with it, and I've seen a lot of indie wrestlers take kindly to it and welcome it. This whole program, it's something that, as you said, it can be great for independent promotions. And one thing I disagree with is when people say, WWE ID, they'll sign the talent they want, and then WWE's scraps, so to say, which I think is a disrespectful thing to say. Honestly, will go, will be released, and WWE's competition will make it tougher for companies to compete with them. The thing is WWE they're not perfect with their recruitment. Not everyone they sign is going to be perfect, and not everyone they release is going to not do anything in this industry. Swerve Strickland was released by WWE. He went on to do amazing things in AEW, and we've had multiple examples of wrestlers being released from WWE, and Tony Storm, another one, where they've just kind of been able to shine in another environment. So to me, I think that kind of argument of if ID talent are if there's talent that aren't signed after being on this ID program, it's not the be all and end all at all. In fact, I think it will give that talent more of an opportunity to show WWE they're wrong and go to somewhere like AEW and be a MJF sort of figure for them. I think there's still lots of opportunities for that. I don't think WWE are perfect in their recruitment. So that argument, I don't understand that personally.
So basically, the argument isn't that specifically. The argument is that if they got released and then they went to AEW and it didn't work out in AEW and they got released from AEW, that they wouldn't then be allowed back in this ecosystem. They wouldn't be able to work any of these independent promotions because they've essentially betrayed WWE, and therefore these independent companies will be afraid to book them because of it. And this isn't something which is going to happen now. It's like a 10 years down the line thing.
Right.
But that is the fear.
I understand the fear of if WWE gets this control, right? But there's also a factor of what will WWE, if they do get this control, what would they do with it? Because right now what we're seeing them advertise independent promotions matches with WWE ID.
It would help independent companies. It would just
kill any chance of there being another top dog. I personally, I don't think these championships are going to be making much of a difference with WWE having control of the wrestling industry, but I don't think they're needed at all, really.
So
fair point on that one.
The only thing, and I really truly do respect your optimism and opinion on this, but I will say, historically speaking, Territory Days, who was the first company that started hiring people from other territories when that was faux pas, when that was not cool. Okay, wait a minute. Then you have the Monday Night Wars, and what was the goal there? Bury the competition. What did they do? Siphon ECW, partner with ECW. Right? What happened with TNA? Spike TV's ours, actually, bud. Historically, we're looking at a company that does things like this. And that is the goal, is the creative control. And I think the level of fear, nothing has truly happened yet, finger quotes. Like Ben said, over the next decade, that's where I think it's dangerous. Because Archie, I do love the optimism. And I would love for suddenly this to be like a nice, leaf turned over and like everybody's all good. But I just I've lived a lot of it. I've seen a lot of it, and that is not usually the goal. Is
Not
for
only that, though,
autonomy
too.
outside of the
It's-
brand.
But not
If-
only
if-
that as well, right? You mentioned, Clark, WWE have done this before. The current
UFC.
owners, Endeavor, Mark Shapiro,
Did the
Ari Emanuel,
exact
did the exact same thing with
thing with the
UFC,
It's the
which
best
now has
example.
created potentially a
As
monopoly.
Right,
close to the
it's-
M word as possible. I mean,
I think-
look, Elite XC, Strike Force, Pride championships were all absolutely electric, and they're all gone.
All partnered with UFC as a
Yeah.
part of their like
All of them
developmental
are
system.
gone.
So I understand that, but then with with competition, right? If we're saying what effect would this have on AEW competing with WWE, right? I still think AEW's come too far to the amount of what they've built. They've come too far to drop off that quickly. I think I personally think AEW will still continue to compete even with this ID program. I don't think it's gonna be death of AEW. And
I don't think it's death of AEW, and I agree with you, Archie. And I don't mean to cut you
Yeah.
off here, but I think you bring up a really good point. My fear is it becomes what TNA sort of TNA tried a little bit like AEW,
Yeah.
didn't quite have the financial resources, but
Mhm.
it widens the gap. Look, right? If it's an accordion, it's a pull and not a
Yeah.
push.
But
On this one,
but
where it's like it separates them further, so AEW can still succeed in the market in some ways, but the idea of actually pushing WWE in any way, the idea of the top of the industry, there being anything even because there really is no debate. It was really fun while they beat the developmental brand in the rankings, which is
Yeah.
Archie, you and I have had this discussion before. It's a bleach stain on a nice pair of jeans. Like it's realistically the fact that they ever beat them in the ratings is it's miracle on ice stuff. You know what I mean? It's an upset. It's the underdogs winning for a brief time at most.
Just I was gonna say one more thing is something to take into mind is Tony Khan is incredibly determined. He's more determined than any competitor WWE have had since WCW to.
I don't agree with that. I think Dixie
You don't
was
think?
just
I think
determined.
I think he is. I think he's that determined to make that mark on professional
Dixie
wrestling
was the
competition
exact same way. Dixie
She
Carter.
was. I think the financial state, as far as the Khan family is concerned, is what lends. He's somewhere between Ted Turner and Dixie Carter, if we're comparing the last three that tried.
No, you are right, and I do very much see that. Tony Khan's not going to go down without a fight. But this isn't next year AEW is going to go out of business, and it's not even an AEW is going to go out of business.
No.
But it's just very simply in 10 years' time, AEW might be struggling like hell. Now, what they should do is what I said in my video the other day. They need to be partnering with independent promotions now. They need to be opening their own schools or partnering with schools. And now they need to beat WWE to it in certain people. And if that happens, it'll split the independent scene in two, which I don't think. I mean,
it's not ideal, but
it's not great, is it? But and then
the,
what would
the
happen?
thing
It'd still be a monopoly, wouldn't it? Because there'd be two.
But I think you're spot on in that AEW can foresee this coming. If it does come, we don't know what the future holds. We don't know the specifics behind any of it, but AEW can prepare for this outcome, and I feel like it's still on them to still be within reach, within a mile's length of WWE. They can still prepare for this eventual outcome, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, we've got a few comments I want to quickly touch upon before we move on. JStyles2419 over on Instagram says the ecosystem of pro wrestling unfortunately runs through WWE. And that is basically, you're not wrong there, but this is the most official it's ever been. We have a couple. Fernando says AEW is not in any jeopardy. Absolutely is not
Do
there.
not skip that Bobby had a Lunchable.
Fair enough. Bobby Petito had a Lunchable. I hope you enjoyed it, Bobby. Shard says Eminem of Eminem is for dorks. You're a dork,
MMA.
Shard.
No, you're a dork, Shard.
What did I say?
What are you talking about? That is
MMA.
it's a bold-faced lie. He doesn't mean that either. He watches
said
all the
MMA, not
UFCs with
Eminem.
us.
I'm
I thought we were
clearly off
friends.
on one today.
Darn it.
I saw the comments shady above it, and I clearly got confused. But now let's move on. And let's move on to talk about Shawn Michaels. Because in case you guys haven't seen, Fandango did an interview did a Q&A session For the Love of Wrestling in the UK this week. And in it, he said that Shawn Michaels said to him at an NXT taping a couple of weeks ago that he thinks he has 1 or 2 left in him. Now, that doesn't mean he's going to return to the ring, but it means he thinks he could. Clark, I know you're a big Shawn Michaels guy. What's your thoughts on this one?
HBK, Shawn Michaels is the best to ever lace up a pair of wrestling boots. There's really no debate about that. He's the best to ever do it. He's the GOAT. He's the Michael Jordan of this game. It's an absolute fact. And do I believe he could? Yes. Do I believe he should? Absolutely no. Please no. We did not need him with a bald head in the match with the Brothers of Destruction in Saudi Arabia. Like, no. Stop, please. He's doing a great job with NXT. He gave us absolute Picasso paintings for the length of his career, including 4 years away with a debilitating back injury. The guy had 2 Hall of Fame careers separately. Could you imagine if they didn't take 4 years of his prime away? What it would be? Yes, it wouldn't be what we would see if he returned. So no, please no. Shawn's last match should have been Shawn's last match. I don't even count the one where he didn't have hair. That was a different guy. That was Stone Cold Shawn Michaels. That's a different person. Doesn't even count. Leave it where it belongs. Shawn and Taker was the last match. That was it. And that's all we deserved. We got everything he had. Of course he could wrestle 2 matches. He's the best to ever do it. Michael Jordan could go score 30 in an NBA game too. I don't need to see that.
Fair enough. I agree completely, Clark. I could not have said it better myself. Bobby Petito says Shawn Michaels does great booking in NXT. Absolutely. Shard says Shawn Michaels versus Eddie Thorpe in a squash match. Then HBK versus Obafemi for the NXT title where he loses in 4 minutes. To be honest, actually, the only way I'd maybe be okay with it happening is if it's something like Obafemi squashes him in like 30 seconds.
Well, just to see how Shawn could sell. Except for that, I don't need to see Shawn at this age.
No, nor do I, but at least then that Brothers of Destruction match isn't his retirement match.
That's true.
Yeah, but the I think that's worse. Just him having getting squashed by
put somebody over. It puts Obafemi over. He'll be known as the man. I mean, I agree with Fernando. The perfect story ending was very simply versus
the thing is, though, is what you can't deny.
That was it for me. I just after that, I don't remember anything else.
I think HBK. The thing is Shawn Michaels might see that Brothers of Destruction match as he's already said that he's regretted it. You know, I think he probably for his conscience, he doesn't want to have that as his last match. And honestly, if HBK has a match against, like we saw with Stone Cold and KO, right, which was a fun match, I wouldn't be opposed to it if it ties a bow on his career the way he wants it to.
No,
obviously,
Shawn...
if he's healthy enough to do that, because I don't really want to see another Shawn Michaels match, but I hate it even more that his last match is that Brothers of Destruction match.
No, that never
So
happened.
if there's
That was in a fantasy
Didn't
world.
exist. It's
We
fake.
didn't.
Oh, yeah,
It
no,
It's
never
yeah,
happened,
fake. I
Archie.
agree with you, Soul, on it, but we do need to move on, guys. But before we do, I need to tell you to support independent wrestling. We were just talking about it, but you guys need to support it as well. And this weekend, Progress Wrestling have another event. They are on absolute fire at the moment, and you can watch it live on demand Progress Plus and on demand Progress Plus as well, as the name suggests. But if you use code What's Progress 1, you can get 50% off your first month for On Demand Progress Plus, the home of Progress Defy and more. I say it all the time, but it's true. It is genuinely my favorite wrestling streaming service. But now let's move on to talk a little bit about Ricky Starks, or I should say Ricky Saints, or maybe Ricky Saint, like Drizzy and Clark want, or maybe Ricky Sparks, like somebody said in the comments today as well. There's a lot of different names. A lot of people disagree on a lot of names, Trim. But here's my take, right? I thought this sounds fine. Ricky Saints. I actually do agree with Drizzy. I think I'd personally prefer it if they dropped the S, but I was okay with it until pre-stream me and Clark were talking about this, and I realized, hang on a second, this is the exact same thing as if Ricky Starks was from North London and he was called Ricky Spurs. I mean, I hate Tottenham, that would make me sick, but even if his name was Ricky Gunners or Ricky Chiefs, I'd still have a problem with it. Why? It's just cheesy. It just is. Like, I liked it until I realized, hang on, this is a sports reference. I don't care if they're your favorite team. I don't care if you're from there. Like, that's just cringe. You can't name yourself after a football team. I'm a big fan of him. It actually sounds fine. Internationally, I think it's a name which works. But in the US, I think it makes me cringe a little bit. But I do think people are overreacting a little on it. Archie, what's your thoughts?
Well, first of all, Ricky Sparks is a new one. I didn't hear of that, but I think you're dead wrong on Ricky Saints. It's for me, when you listen to why he chose it, it wasn't just because it was his favorite team. It was, or it was not. It was more so. He even said it wasn't even really just because that's what one of the sports teams in New Orleans is called. It's because he wants to bring a connection of New Orleans with him on his journey with WWE. So when you listen to his reasoning for why he chose that, then I don't think it's as cringe as you're making it out. Personally, I agree with you that people are overreacting. They're way overreacting. We saw it with Walter to Gunther, Io Shirai to Io Sky. And look at where they are now. Gunther's in the main event scene in WWE. Io Sky is swimming around at the top of the women's division in WWE. It's not it's not a name change that will hold him back at all. It's a name that I can easily see on a poster. CM Punk versus Ricky Saints. It's a strong, that's a strong matchup name. It's a strong name for me. And I think the reaction to it is over the top. And I saw what Drizzy and Clark said on Off the Air, and I usually agree completely with what you guys say. But I think saying Ricky Saints doesn't make me want to say Ricky Saint. Like, just removing the S or having the S, it doesn't, like, to me, that doesn't make a difference. In fact, if it was Ricky Saint, it would make me want to say Saints instead of Saint. Like,
No, Ricky Saint.
I don't
That's
think
an extra letter. More work.
No, because
he could have been Ricky Pelicans. Speaking of New Orleans teams,
like, it's one letter. Like, I think that's over the top. But what I will say is, if he doesn't name his finisher Saints Row, then he's missed the trick there.
The absolute move was to name him Absolute Ricky and have the Absolutely Ricky talk show.
He still have that.
It would be perfect. Absolute Ricky would have made way more sense. Forget the last name, forget the rest of it. Absolute Ricky, just call him that. I mean, here's the thing. With the Saints, New Orleans Saints are so synonymous with the city. I think it's unique, and I understand that's probably a domestic thing, right? Like that's an American thing, but like the fact of the matter is, yes, there's the Saints, and then there's the Pelicans, the basketball team. The Pelicans used to be the Charlotte Hornets.
Ricky
Um,
Pelicans.
Yeah, Ricky Pelicans would have been hilarious, but at the same time, that wasn't gonna work. Ricky Saints at least makes sense, but um I think here's the problem: is it's so synonymous with the team, and I understand the value to the city. Saint would have counted for the same thing because you have a lot of Saint this, Saint that around New Orleans. It would have worked, and I think the lack of the plurality, it gets you away from mistakenly saying Starks, which a lot of us have done over the last 24 hours. And I think that's more where me and Drizzy were coming from on dropping the S at the end of Saints than anything, because I don't mind them honoring or him honoring the New Orleans Saints in any way. Like I think it's worth it. But at the same time, like it is just it's an interesting topic.
So you saying you would have
Ricky-
preferred Ricky Sparks?
No.
DCX Warlord says
Maybe
at
Ricky
least
Spark.
it wasn't Ricky Staines. So I mean that's a positive.
Now
to look
we're
at, isn't it?
talking.
Bobby Matito wants to see Ricky insert name against Trick Williams. That would be an absolute banger, no doubt about it. And Shard says he will have a big entrance at Mania in Nolan.
I could see him facing CM Punk at next year at Mania in his first Mania.
Ooh, I'd quite like that. A rematch
Punk
of
versus
the Owen.
Pelicans.
But
In Nola.
Ricky Pelicans.
who's got a worse name? Chick Magnet Punk or Ricky Pelicans? That's what it's going to come down to. But
Nah, don't diss Chick Magnet Punk.
On a more positive note, last night's NXT was fantastic. We had a few comments about it earlier on today, but it absolutely was. I mean, we had Jordan Gray show up, team with Julia and Stephanie Vaquer. That's a dream team I never thought I'd see. We had Moose and Obafemi stare off. We had Ricky become Saints. We had the Hardys announced for next week. And I said it in a tweet earlier on today, or an X post, whatever Elon wants me to call it, right? But this era, this current era right now of NXT, we are going to look back on in 10 years like, that was a hell of a good time. So we really, really need to enjoy it now because it is in such a good place right now. But the question, specifically today's question is right now better than NXT Black and Gold? What are your thoughts, Archie?
Well, so here's the thing. NXT Black and Gold is something that's quite close to my heart because I became a regular watcher of NXT in 2017. And that period between 2017 and around 2019 was the most fun I've had as a fan, personally, watching a weekly wrestling show. So for me, the actual product is NXT Black and Gold beats this current NXT because I've not had so many connections to so many characters as I've had on one wrestling show as I've had with Black and Gold. You know, I've had, Aleister Black, Tommaso Ciampa, Johnny Gargano, Adam Cole. All of these characters we saw in NXT Black and Gold, they're some of my favorite characters I've seen live, watching wrestling. But here's the thing, for WWE as a company, having this current NXT, which for me is a merge between 2.0 and Black and Gold, for WWE as a company, it's a lot more beneficial for them than Black and Gold is, because when I was watching NXT around that time in 2017, 2019, and I was watching Adam Cole, Aleister Black, all the names I mentioned, I was thinking to myself, I was dreading for the day that one of them could potentially get called up to the main roster. I didn't want to see any of them get called up to the main roster. I wanted to see them stay in NXT. I wanted to see, because that's where they were at their best, and I never ever thought that they would be at their best on the main roster. So for me, when I was watching NXT Black and Gold, I never wanted to see any of these guys really make the jump to the main roster because I was worried what Vince was going to do with them. But now, this current NXT, you see talent like Julia, Stephanie Vaquer, Jordan Grace, Ricky Saints, Obafemi, these are people that I'm loving on the NXT product right now, but they're also talent that I want to really see go on the main roster. I'm excited to see on the main roster Julia and Rhea Ripley, Stephanie Vaquer and Io Sky, Obafemi versus Gunther. I want to see a promo battle between Ricky Saints and LA Knight, you know? So for me, although I think the product of NXT Black and Gold was better, I think NXT is in a much better place now where I'm not afraid of how these talents are going to be used when they get called up. And I'm actually looking forward to the day that they get called up. And the product itself is one of the most consistent wrestling shows right now. That's no knock on NXT now when I say NXT Black and Gold was better as a product, because NXT now is more consistent as a wrestling show than SmackDown and Dynamite, in my opinion. I think Raw and NXT are the most consistent wrestling shows in wrestling right now. But although I think that NXT Black and Gold product was better, I think NXT is in a far better place than it's ever been in.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is a great point, like the wrestling matches undoubtedly were better in black and gold, but at the same time, that created an issue because they couldn't use talents like a Braun Breaker who'd been ready for a little bit during the end of Black and Gold, and they didn't think he was ready enough to be called up to Black and Gold because the level of wrestling there was so high, and therefore it actually became very difficult for it to, perform as a developmental brand. So I do completely agree with you there. In ring-wise, NXT Black and Gold was a bit better, but now as a developmental brand, I think it does its job better. But Clark, what are your thoughts?
So we got a multitude of adjectives in relation to this current era. We've got version, era, all kinds of different things that we've used to describe it. And then we talk about the Black and Gold 2.0, which everyone knows is not the best era. It's either Black and Gold or this one. What do we call this era? Why don't we call it the off the air era? Because ever since off the air has been on the air, every single Tuesday night, this has been the best version of NXT by miles and miles. It's not close. Black and Gold were losers. They had to move nights. They had to tuck tail and run away. And then they went rainbow colors and a Sweet Wale song. And now we are back to really high quality wrestling. We are back to a really high quality roster full of talent, ready and chomping at the bit for not only the main roster, but everything going on NXT. If you look at NXT right now, look at all of the women's division mid-card titles. Which one feels the most important? I don't know. If it's me, it's probably the one Stephanie Vaquer is carrying around on her shoulder. I'm just saying. NXT right now is on fire. It's arguably the most entertaining weekly show of the three brands, despite all of this stuff. Heck, you throw in some Corey Graves drama, and we're still stoked about it, and he's been excellent on commentary too. You got Booker T. The roster is packed. The roster is talented. I hope when we do look back at this, we understand how truly great it was, because this has been as fun of a few years as we've ever seen when it comes to NXT. And it's the ultimate comeback without saying it. That is the brilliance of how NXT has gone about this. They didn't have to do a big old rebrand. They didn't have to do anything throw in your face. Nothing. No. They just said, actually, we're going to stick with really good wrestling and really good storylines and really good talent and see how that works. It does. It does.
Absolutely. No, Clark, I think you made a lot of great points there, and I want to quickly read out some of these comments. We have Shard saying Tatum Paxley and Tiffany Stratton are bigger stars than anyone in black and gold, bigger stars than anyone in AEW, and bigger stars than anyone in New Japan, TNA, all of that. Bobby Petito says Aleister Black did have a great run in NXT black and gold, no doubt about it. That was absolutely brilliant. Shard's also saying that NXT's current product is the most transcending stuff I may have ever seen for women's wrestling on a weekly TV show, certainly in the US. The ladies are the backbone,
best division in wrestling.
100%. That's something I did want to say is NXT is the perfect example, and it's it's a show that a lot of even WWE themselves can learn from in booking women's wrestling. Women's wrestling, it deserves a lot more attention. And when you see the attention it gets on NXT and how they are seen as equal to the men's division, it shows you what's capable, what wrestling brands are capable of booking women's wrestling. And I want to see wrestling do more of that. That's something that NXT beats, this current NXT beats Black and Gold easily in terms of the women's division.
I mean, honestly, and we always talk about this, but it's true. Like, the women's division in NXT is just, I mean, I can't believe we have to say this in 2025, but it proves it should be 50-50. Like, I don't understand how we're still having to say that. But
it's one of the fastest growing brands at the minute.
I mean, it's unbelievable. I looked at the match last night, and Carmen Petrovic wins the big one there, triple threat. You have Kalani and Jada Parker in it. The amount of stars, and we're looking at Carmen Petrovic like, I can't believe she won. And it's like, no, but she's also that good too. It's just that the other two in the match,
crazy.
It's like it's as competitive as any division in all of sports entertainment, wrestling, whatever you want to call it.
And also, that's another thing, is Jada Parker and Kalani have got their own little story going on. When was the last time we saw a proper non-title feud in the women's in WWE or in AEW, or really anywhere in
any other roster
in the big
long while.
This is NXT's kind of showing wrestling promotions what to do when it comes to women's wrestling.
No doubt about it. We're about to finish the show, but before we do, Shard, Moose's trash wall. What are you on, Shard?
That stare down was good.
You know what? Maybe we keep off the air as Clark and Trizzy. I'm only joking. But that does bring us to the end of the show, guys. Thank you so much for watching and commenting along throughout and over on Instagram as well. We got some comments from JMoney17. Shout out to you. He wants Moose versus Obafemi in the main event of Stand and Deliver. That would be a banger.
That'd be cool.
And we will see you guys for the next one. Pa 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 pa.